Welcome, Kat. Welcome, Omer. I'll start in just a few minutes. I'm okay, Omer. Oh, yeah, I know. Me too. Yeah, I know. Anyway, um, if Kat and Omer are ready, we can begin. So let's see. So this is, we'll start with the slides. Um, well, we'll start here, obviously. We are still in Penrith in the north. You can see up there. I think this is September 18th. Gotta remember now. Yes. Okay. So last time we went to Scotland. Hmm. And this time, I think, let's look at my records here. Yes, the third to last day in Penrith. You guys can see this. Here's a typical alleyway. A welcome, Nemo. We just began. But this is a typical alleyway in Penrith. It's like a little town center, and it's sort of like Edinburgh, in which you have a small town center, and then there's a bunch of alleyways coming off of that. And the idea was it was fortified against attack from the Scots back in the day. So they could close off all the main roads, and all of the internal roads were facing inwards. There's no outward facing roads. So you can make it like a castle. But anyway, So we took a cab ride about 6 miles or about 10 kilometers outside of town to Lothar Castle. And Lothar Castle, we'll see in a moment, is this. It's a well-known castle you can visit in the area. It was invented by owned by the Lothar family, who were, we'll see in a little bit, were in the area since, you know, as long as anybody knows. And a castle is along the Lothar River, which is a tributary to the Eden. And I remember this day. Was it this day? I feel like it was this day. This was the day when I was supposed to do. I planned to do laundry like once a week, but this was the day I think of the royal funeral for Queen Elizabeth. So a lot of places were not open. It was a bank holiday in the UK. So the usual laundromat I was going to go to in town was closed. So I arranged my host. I'd use her machine, her washing machine, that day, and then I put the laundry out to dry in the back. And it was supposed to be like the one day there was not predicted to be any rain. And then when I was here, about midway through the afternoon, it began to rain very heavily, and I was obviously way too far away from town to come back. So all my laundry got extremely wet that day. I had to walk home very, very slowly through the rain. And then when I got back, all my laundry was soaked and useless. And I only had one pair of clothing at that time. So that was a lot of fun. Um, but on the one day, it was expected not to be rain. It torrentially rained. But we'll see about that. So this was built by the Lothar family. Um, this specific castle was actually built, I want to say, we'll get to that slide in a moment, in like the 19th century is like a vanity castle. Some of the outer walls are just for vanity's sake. They're not really, they're not actual medieval castles. Um, some of the actual central house was inhabited and was a real house, but some of the outer grounds were just sort of fantasy. And then it burned down in the 1890s, so we'll get to that. Thank you, Omar. And this is one of those like really spectacular castles you can visit. It really looks like something ridiculous. I mean, I have a snack, by the way. Mm. Hey, Alex. Welcome to Lothar Castle on the official day of the royal funeral. Oops. Yes, Alex. There was nothing else open that day, so I could either stay in my cramped Airbnb room all day, do nothing, or I could go to the one place that's open at a time. I think that it's been 4 years, Alex. So I might be confusing a few things here, but that's what it feels like that happened today. That's interesting, Alex. Thank you, Nemo. I had to step away for a moment, Nemo. Sorry. Yes, it does, Omer. It's always gray there. But most of what you're looking at was actually built in 19th century as kind of like a vanity project. It wasn't really an inhabited castle. I know. Is it about California? You know you're near Scotland when you see Scots thistles. Here's the courtyard. There's a little cafe inside, and the ticket office is also inside there. Oh, no problem, man. It's okay. I have no way to talk about it. So, hello, Gian. Nice to drop by. So let's look at some of the exhibits. Sam Robinson was a gameskeeper, also during the time of the Yellow Earl. His father, Charles, had been a Lothar keeper before him, and his daughter Alice was the personal assistant to Gracie, Countess Lonsdale. Although the Yellow Earl left Lothar for Rutland in 1936, he continued to see the Robinson family personal Christmas card every year until his death. The story of Lothar, 1150 to 1700. From Vikings to Vegetarians, the Viking. History books tell us that Lothar, the place and the dynasty, began with a man named Dolfin. Dolfin was probably of Viking descent and chose Lothar as a place to settle for its beauty, its wealth of trees and game, and its river. Indeed, the name Lothar is believed to come from the Old North, meaning foaming river. Dolfin lived at Lothar in around 1150. Early versions of the family name include Loder, Lodrer, and de Lothar. Luthran. Let's see if we can read some of this. Considered historically, these monuments are valuable as showing that Lothar was settled in the 10th century by members of the great Danish colony from Yorkshire, Christianized Vikings. In the 11th year of the reign of Edward I, 1283, Sir Hugh de Lothar was granted the right to embark at Lothar. This is the original document, complete with accompanying seal, The Warring Scots. Throughout the 14th century, warring with the Scots was an occupational hazard in the north. The king launched attacks, and the Scots attacked back, or vice versa. Hugh the Lothar, too, son of Hugh I, was loyal to the crown and duly played his part in these skirmishes. He may well have participated in other Scottish battles, including those against William Wallace and the victor of Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce. 1345, a band of 30,000 Scots swooped on Penrith, took thousands prisoner. These were later sold as cattle north of the border. It was perhaps with the Scots in mind that, in the 1350s, Hugh III took the judicious step of replacing the motte and bailey that the Lothars inhabited. He built instead a Pele Tower. Pele Towers were fortified, word Pele derives from the land Palus, or stake. More importantly, they were tall, meaning the marauders could be spotted from afar. When not fighting the Scots, the Lothars continued to enlarge their holdings of land. Hugh Lothar III, adding the manors of Hackthorpe, Thrimby, Bampton, and Ashcombe to his tally. By marrying Margaret the Whaler, he came into further land and still part of the estate today. And yes, the Lothars are the largest landholders in the area to this day. At war, at peace, at home, abroad. The Battle of Agincourt, illustrated from the Chroniques by Enguerrard de Montserrat, early 15th century. The 15th century saw the Lothar family at war, at peace, at court, in parliament. Gradually, their wealth and lands accrued, by marriage, in some cases by purchase in others. Several members of the family took part in the Battle of Agincourt, at which it is said 10,000 French and 112 English died. Among the Lothars who fought was Hugh V, the Little. In the 16th century, hostilities between the Scots and English took a new turn when Henry VIII chose to break from the Roman Catholic Church. Descent from his nephew James V of Scotland came to a head in 1542, and the Battle of Solway, or Solway Moss, ensued. At the time, Sir John Lothar, aged 55 and beset with gout, was deputy captain of Carlisle Castle. As such, he fought at Solway Moss, and for his role in the victory was elevated to captain. This was apparently a mixed blessing. According to Sir John, Carlisle Castle had a hall that no fire can be built it in, and a kitchen that no cook may brook for smoke. So John died 1553, bequeathing his estates not to his son, whom he knew to be unthrifty, but to his grandsons, Richard and Gerard. Magistratus indicat reum. Richard Lothar and Mary, Queen of Scots. Sir Richard Lothar, whose life spanned the Elizabethan era, was a remarkable man. His involvement in national affairs began when he was appointed Deputy Warden of the West March. The role required him to patrol towns and garrisons along the border, defending the country from invasion. Richard Lothar was also deputy captain of Carlisle Castle. He had a lot of roles. On 16th May 1568, Mary, Queen of Scots, beleaguered cousin Elizabeth I, landed at Workington on the west Cumbrian coast. She was fleeing Scotland, having suffered a defeat in battle at Langside. On Mary's behalf, Elizabeth asked her Secretary of State, Sir William Cecil, to write to Mr. Lothar, Deputy Captain of Carlisle, to know if she might safely come hither. Mary of Scotland, mourning over the dying Douglas at the Battle of Langside, 1568. Original by Charles Landseer, 1799 to 1879. It looks very Victorian. During her stay at Carlisle Castle, Mary was allowed to go to church services in the city and occasionally to walk on a playing green towards Scotland, where she watched some of her 30 to 40 attendants playing ball. On 13th July, Mary left Carlisle for Bolton Castle, choosing Lothar Hall as her first sleeping place on the journey. Of her care by Sir Richard, Mary wrote to Queen Elizabeth, I must thank you for the good reception which I have had in your country, and principally for Mr. Lothar, who received me with all courtesy. Uh, Land, Coal, and Politics. Lothar Hall, ablaze. As the 18th century dawned, prospects for the Lothar family looked excellent. Richard, John's eldest son and heir, was said to have promise. The house and gardens were in the pink. The family finances were robust. But events did not unfold as they might have. Unexpectedly and swiftly, smallpox stole up Richard and he died 1714, aged 21. Richard's younger brother, Henry, was a reluctant successor. It was 4 years later, in 1718, while he was in charge at Lothar Hall, a place he had little fondness for, was struck by fire. The steward, it seems, that it was needless to sweep the chimneys. A contemporary noted, always blame the steward. Furniture, frescoes, and treasures perished, the whole central building burning down in a couple of hours. When Henry died in 1751, the house remained a charred shell. The estate's finances were depleted. There was no heir. So in 1751, the existing Lothar line was broken. The estates passed to a cousin, James Lothar, a man whom history remembers as the Wicked Jimmy. Okay, Nemo. And that's a fancy outfit right there. Wicked Jimmy, Tyrant of the North. Jimmy Grap, Grassball, Earl A toadstool. These are some of the names attributed to Sir James in his lifetime. Samuel Boswell noted Jimmy's contradictions. He could show great charm and humor. He could explode with rage. There was no doubt that in today's society he'd be given special attention after lessons. The portrait by Hudson shows Sir James as a young man, dressed in Van Dyck Harlequin costume. Note the mask, a second face. Coal. Story of Lothar, 1700 to 1802. One of James Lothar's principal sources of income were the coal fields around Whitehaven. These came into a family in the 17th century when Sir Christopher Lothar, second son of Sir John Lothar II, took on the manor of St. Bees. An enthusiastic entrepreneur, Sir Christopher, pursued a career in trade, selling salt, meat, fish, cloth, timber, wheat, and coal across the sea to Ireland. Sir Christopher's son, Sir John Lothar, 1642 to 1705, suffered from poor health, probably acute gout, and preferred to remain south in London. This did nothing to diminish his interest in his collieries, however, and he came up with many innovations for the Whitehaven mines. These include the introduction of cartways, carts pulled by horses rather than along wooden rails, a coal wagon on a cartway, 19th century descent of the cartways introduced at Whitehaven by Sir Christopher Lothar's son, Sir John. At one time, Whitehaven was the second or third most popular city in England, believe it or not. And it's definitely not that today. Here's I think it's a Newcomb engine. What is it? A something of the engine, a action of the engine, maybe. I'm not sure how to read that. Sir John's enthusiasm for coal and the getting of it was matched and exceeded by those of his younger son and eventual heir, James Lothar of Whitehaven, Wicked Jimmy's benefactor. At the newly sunken stone pit, James installed one of the world's earliest steam engines to help with drainage and with the haulage of loads to the surface. Welcome back, Cap. Do you guys know why coal was first used in England? Oh, that's the whole engine. That was, that was the Newcomb engine. That's all there was. So coal was first. Well, it's always been mined to some extent, obviously. And England at the time, had an unusually good supply. But it was originally used widely as a fuel when it was declared by the Royal Navy that nobody could chop down any wood in England for for fuel to heat your house or whatever, because all the what was left of the forest in England were supposed to be used by the Royal Navy to make ships. So you couldn't use it to make fuel anymore. So you had to use some alternative fuel, and so coal began to be used instead. And that was sort of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution because coal has greater energy density than wood does, and you really need it in order to properly power steam engines and stuff. So that's kind of the origin of the Industrial Revolution and why it happened in England versus somewhere else. Because you need coal, and they couldn't burn wood, so they had to burn coal because all the wood belongs to the Royal Navy, basically. That's good, Cat and Omer. Demonized and disliked. Wicked Jimmy was not loveless. His marriage to Lady Mary was certainly unhappy, but Jimmy was devoted to his mistress. Betsy Lewes was the daughter of an innkeeper. Wicked Jimmy had met her while traveling between Lothar and London. Tragically, Betsy died young, the nail. Jimmy was inconsolable. According to Thomas de Quincey, Jimmy had Betsy embalmed. A glass was placed over her features, and at intervals the Earl paid visits to this sad memorial of his former happiness. Hmm. They certainly had interesting hats back then. Whitehaven. During Sir James Lothar's tenure, based on tonnage shipped out of his harbour, Whitehaven was one of the most important ports in Great Britain, second only to London. But when the Lothars first arrived, Whitehaven was tiny, a few houses, a few fishermen. Sir Christopher nonetheless saw its potential as a port, and in 1634 built a pier. True champion of Whitehaven was not Sir Christopher Lothar, but his son Sir John. It was he who was responsible for buying Flat Hall, and he who supervised development of the town itself. Sir John was a friend of Sir Christopher Wren, architect of St. Paul's Cathedral, and it was perhaps through him that Lothar gleaned some of its architectural ideas. Either way, they were very specific. Houses were to be 3 stories high, not less than 28 feet from the street level to the square of the side walls. The windows of the first and second stories to be transomed. Whitehaven was, in its day, a jewel of Georgian urban planning, drawn up on a gridiron pattern. It is thought that the layout of New York was modeled on it. That's interesting, Nemo. Interesting symbolism. You have a crown, and then you have a probably an urn with lion's feet, two ram's heads, and then you have crossed a flame, a torch of probably knowledge or wisdom, and then the caduceus of medicine. Oh, it looks like there's an arrow behind. It's interesting. And more ram's heads and a cattle skull. The story of Lothar, 1700 to 1802. Rip. Money bought St. Sir James Lothar political advantage, notoriety, and titles. In 1784, he was made Earl of Lonsdale, Viscount Lothar, and Viscount Lonsdale. He's 17th Earl and Viscount, but okay. Money, black, gold, or otherwise, did not, however, buy him happiness. His marriage was barren, and in 1802, wicked Jimmy died of a mortification of the bowels. Sounds bad. Passing, probably like stomach cancer or something, passing his fortunes in what still remained of Lothar Hall to his godson and distant cousin, William Lothar of Splintton. They said that Jimmy's ghost, galloping a coach and unkempt horses at speed, still haunts Lothar Park. Oh gosh. I hope to visit someday, Nemo. View of Whitehaven with figures in the foreground by Peter de Wint, 1784 to 1849. Peter de Wint was English, of Dutch extraction, and is principally remembered as a landscape painter. He was patronized by the first Earl Lonsdale, who became a tutor to Lonsdale's daughter, Lady Mary Lothar, probably in around 1810. His view of Lothar hangs on an adjacent wall. For Lothar, a castle. The most notable change that William brought to Lothar was the creation of a building to replace the burnt and tattered Lothar Hall. The commission initially was given to the architect George Dance the Younger, but Dance handed the project over to his pupil, the young Robert Smirke, saying the distance from London was too far for him to cover. As a distinguished public figure and one of the richest men of his day, William Lothar wanted a house to befit his status. Smirke, just 26, proposed design for a castle in the Gothic Revival style. The proposal did not lack ambition. Its estimated cost was £150,000, or 11 million today's money, probably like 20 today. Among the many fine craftsmen Smirke employed was Francis Bernasconi, an ornamental plasterer who had already come to public attention for his work on the grand staircase at Windsor Castle. Lothar Castle took 12 years to complete and cost just under half the original estimate. Those were the days. Robert Smirke went on to become an official architect to the Office of Works, and today is best known for his great institutional buildings in London, including the British Museum. Smirke died, aged 87, successful, wealthy, knighted. A great Victorian seat. When Mrs. Arbuthnot, a friend of Duke of Wellington, came to stay at Lothar in August 1826, she was hugely impressed. I cannot conceive anything finer or more magnificent. as well as comfortable than the interior of the house. The entrance is like coming into the aisle of a Gothic cathedral. Lothar's magnificence lay not just in its architecture and its setting, but also the treasures within. Both William Lonsdale and later his son, William II, were prodigious art collectors. 1825, Lord Lonsdale's study alone contained 31 paintings, among them a Titian, a Bruegel, a Murillo, and a Van Dyck. For the Titian, a study of an old man's head, Lonsdale paid a whopping sum of £30. Catherine Lothar and General Wolfe. One of the greatest British military heroes of the 18th century was James Wolfe, 1727 to 59, a man known for his death as the Victor of Quebec. Wolfe was just 13 when he entered the army and quickly worked his way through the ranks, taking part in the War of Austrian Succession, the Jacobite Rising, the Seven Years' War. In 1757, Wolfe's military success gained the attention of William Pitt the Elder, who promoted him to brigadier and sent him to Canada to tackle the French. Catherine Lothar was the sister of Wicked Jimmy, and a true beauty. She met Wolfe while living close to his parents in Bath. Wolfe proposed at once. As he prepared to leave for Canada, Catherine gave him a locket containing her portrait. 2 years later, General Wolfe succeeded in his mission to liberate Canada from the French. In the endeavor, however, at the Battle of Quebec, he died. It is said that on the eve of battle, Wolfe had a premonition of his death. In his will, he had instructed that the miniature be set in jewels to the amount of 500 guineas and returned. Catherine later married the Duke of Bolton. The Story of Lothar, 1844 to 1882. William II, Henry, and St. George. 40 years of family life at Lothar came to an end in 1844 when William the Good died and his eldest son William succeeded. William was a politician, a naval man, and athlete. He never married, but spent much of his time frequenting the more louche aspects of Europe's capital cities in pursuit of love and opera. One of the many paintings William added to the family collection was a portrait of the Chevalier d'Eon by Jean-Laurent Mosnet, possibly the first recorded painting of a transvestite. The second Earl died in 1872. His principal contribution to Lothar, apart from adding considerable to his art collection, was a sophisticated drainage system. He was also an early supporter of MacAdam, actually, I think it is. William had no heirs, and Lothar passed to his nephew, Henry, the third Earl. Then, shortly after, to St. George, Henry's son. Neither held tenure for long, St. George dying in London at age 26. Huh. The Yellow Earl. I think you could be like a drummer boy or something like that at 13. You know, there's some sort of roles like that. You weren't directly in combat per se, but you could have various kind of support roles, and then you could sort of like apprentice in to the army, so to speak. Um, well, if you were in the 18th century, you were probably apprenticing to something at age 13. You were gaining on-job training. The Yellow Earl. When Hugh Cecil Lothar was a boy, he had no expectation of taking over, or any other part of the family estates. He was a young son. His education formed as much by his early attachment to a traveling circus as by his brief encounter with Eton. Nevertheless, the fifth Earl of Lonsdale swept into Lothar with considerable gusto. Legendary feats of physical prowess preceded him. In 1878, he managed to walk 100 miles on the Great North Road at an average speed of just under 6 miles per hour. That's more like a jog, but okay. A year later, he challenged and defeated, so he claimed, the world boxing heavyweight champion, John L. Sullivan. Carrying on as he had started, Hugh Lonsdale, supported by his wife Gracie, brought Lothar Castle to life in more exuberant ways than his great grandfather could possibly have envisioned. He bought carriages, horses, cars, dogs by the dozen. He had each one of his grooms and his gardeners dressed in immaculate livery. He had virtually every object in his possession engraved with family crests, and in his buttonhole he wore a fresh gardenia which the head gardener picked for him daily. Hugh soon became known as the Yellow Earl. Lothar abandoned, 1882 to 1936. Boxing, horse racing, fox hunting, high society. Hugh Lonsdale was conspicuous wherever he went, beloved of the press, adored by the people. Everyone he put his hand to, he did with tremendous verve for everything. To spend £3,000 a year on cigars alone, to insist that his dogs have their own first-class rail carriage, to travel with a 24-piece orchestra, these and many other of Hugh's foibles did not come cheap, all paid for by gold. The Yellow Earl may have been known affectionately as Lordy throughout the pubs and clubs of England, but to his trustees he was a constant worry. Moreover, the peak of Lordy's spending coincided with a great economic downturn. Coal was no longer produced income it had. Land rents were in decline. The party was over. 1926, the year of the Great Depression, Hugh sold their Rutland home, Barleythorpe. When they left January 1936, Hugh and Gracie left Lothar Castle for good. Gracie died 1941, a CBE to her name thanks to her services in nursing during the First World War. I think it's Chevalier of the British Empire. She was followed in 1844 by her husband, formidable horseman, a demon organizer, and a showman to his fingertips. They are buried side by side within the grounds of the Lothar Church. That might be the case, Homer. Thank you, Homer. Yellow. Wherever you look at Lothar, throughout the family archives, in the estate offices, in the family church above the river Lothar, you'll find references to the color yellow. The origins of the family fondness for the color lie in the family coat of arms, which feature the color or. Or, of course, means gold. In heraldic terms, it can signify the sun, or gold itself, for the human qualities of faith, or obedience, and gentility. At Lothar, when the Yellow Earl's expenditure knew no bounds, he had nothing but golden Labradors, chestnut horses, yellow cars. His carriages were yellow, his private orchestra was yellow, more yellow. At one point, he even bred buff-colored turkeys. Hmm. If you visit the Rutland County Museum, you will find an old game larder. It was sold from Barleythorpe, the Yellow Earl's hunting box, 1926. And the game larder's color, by of course, yellow. To the Arctic, a scandal. In the 1880s, already married, Hugh Lonsdale, the Yellow Earl, began an affair with the actress Violet Cameron. Cameron was married herself to a Moroccan tea taster. Tea taster? Okay. Monsieur de Bensuade. And together they had started an open opera company. With Lonsdale as their financier, they went on a tour of the English provinces. It was a dangerous cocktail and resulted in a fight, a court appearance, and much legal brouhaha. After further scandal, Queen Victoria intervened. She was not amused. Lord Lonsdale was advised to make a trip abroad. For various reasons, a journey to the Arctic was chosen. The Arctic. Okay. Whether or not Hugh Lonsdale experienced temperatures of negative 110 degrees Fahrenheit, went 200 miles a day, discovered a waterfall 200 feet high, is unlikely. He was a notorious exaggerator, but he returned from his 17-month trip to a hero's welcome. He also returned with 4 of the huskies who had pulled his sledge. This is one of them. He liked to embalm things. Or maybe his ancestor did, so. That's a pretty short-haired dog. I will say that for the Arctic. The Kaiser's dinner. Many and elaborate were the preparations for the Kaiser's visit to Lothar. First, in 1895, the Yellow Earl extended the park by several hundred acres, felling hundreds of trees to make the most of the castle's views towards the north and Penrith. Lodges were built at north and south gates. A program of alterations and embellishments were undertaken inside the house. The Kaiser traveled with a sizable retinue at every moment of their stay, from their seats on the train to their lunch at the Old England Hotel and Bowness on Windermere were minutely planned. Because of his withered arm, the Kaiser was not a particularly good shot. But the Yellow Earl organized hundreds of rabbits released in the woods to ensure that his royal guests' shooting expedition was a triumph. Of the guests named and the placement shown, General von Scholl was aide adjutant to the Kaiser. His appointment made in 1888. Speaker James Lothar was a cousin, a distinguished Speaker of the House of Commons, and for his sins a long-standing trustee of the Yellow Earl. Count Metternich was German ambassador to London. General von Plessen was one of the Kaiser's closest confidants. That is quite the dinner set. Canal Defense Unit. The Story of Lothar, 1942-5. During the war, a total of 113,350 non-industrial premises were repositioned for use as hospitals, schools, bases for the army. These included Lothar Castle, which in January 1942 became home to the 49th Tank Regiment. While at Lothar, the Tank Regiment trained to become a night fighting battalion, experimenting with a new, highly secret weapon, the Canal Defense Light. This light, mounted on a tank's turret, was 13 million candle power, and with its particular arc, could blind the enemy, enabling backup friendly forces to move forward unseen. The power of the CDL was so strong, it is said that when a squadron of 16 tanks was operating, it was possible on a dark night to read a newspaper in the streets of Penrith, 5 miles away. £20 million was spent on developing the Canal Defense Light. 1,850 Matilda and Sherman tanks were adapted to carry light, and 6,000 troops were trained to operate it. Winston Churchill and General Eisenhower greatly admired the weapon, yet because the program was cloaked in secrecy, CDL never saw active combat. Oh, great. it's so secret you can use it. The generals who might have exploited it were largely unaware of its very existence. Here's a view from the top when it still is standing. Sale at his lordship's. When Lancelot Lothar came to inherit the family estate in 1844, the estate finances were in their knees. Pardon me. The house bore the scars of chronic lack of investment. Dry rot and penetrating damp were rampant. The gardens had gone to ruin. In addition, Lancelot was not a young man, and post-war England was a despondent place. The contents of Lothar Castle decided Lancelot should be sold. So in March 1947, the largest ever country house sale England had seen got underway. Over 4 months and 18 separate sale days, 7,839 lots were put under the hammer. In 1949, Lancelot's oldest son, Anthony, who was expected to inherit, predeceased his father. Right? Lancelot died in 1953, leaving the entire can of worms to an ill-prepared James Hugh William Lothar. A castle reprieved. It was the intervention of English heritage in 1999 that finally brought an end to the steady disintegration of Lothar Castle and its gardens by focusing thoughts on saving this national treasure. Detailed reports and surveys were carried out. The pigs were banished, the chicken sheds knocked down, spruce trees harvested, removed. Lothar Castle and Gardens Trust formed by Brian Gray and Jim Lothar, among others. The lengthy process of bringing Lothar Castle and its medieval gardens back from the brink was underway. Grants from the Northwest Development Agency, the European Regional Development Fund, the Architectural Heritage Fund, and considerable investment by Lothar Estate Trust helped the tide turn. Lothar Castle you see today is no recreation of its past self. Echoes remain from its Victorian and Edwardian heydays, but now it is a new venture, a ruin with a view. Gardens within gardens, a place for families to come and explore both past and present. Just as Lothar family had marched with the history of this sceptered isle, so its seat continues, not fearful of change, but embracing it and paving the way for centuries more as a hub of northern endeavor. Demolition and dormancy. Shortly after James Lonsdale inherited the Lothar estates, he was taken aside by one of his trustees and told Lothar is lost. Lonsdale refused to accept that his inheritance could not be salvaged. His decision to remove the castle roof was part of the conviction. For over 15 years, Lothar Castle sat roofless and largely undisturbed. The pigs, chickens, spruce trees that came to surround it may have presided over a dark hour in the castle's history. But ultimately, they were the castle's salvation. James Lonsdale's gravestone inscription reads, Agri Alfariana Scrivator, Servitor, Savior of the Lothar Estates. The seventh Earl made some hard decisions, but in the end, he had been proved to have been a visionary. Hmm. You can see the clouds beginning to gather here. It was a very rainy walk on the way back. Gracie, Countess Lonsdale. History, on the whole, is not kind to women. Successful though they have been in their own right, it's always hard to discover their stories. Gracie, Countess Lonsdale, is no exception. Her husband, the Yellow Earl, Hugh Lonsdale, was known across the globe. Today his name lives on in a type of cigar, a boxing prize, a sporting library, and a legend. Gracie is that way barrel in that way barrel exists. Lady Lonsdale had an interesting link with the pictorial past. She was the daughter of the ninth Marquis of Huntly, who, as a young man, danced a minute with Marie Antoinette at the Tuileries, and as an old man, danced a quadrille with Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace. Gets around. It was an incident Queen Victoria was very fond of recalling. Um, it's hard to imagine that Gracie enjoyed a happy life. She was an invalid for much of it, had, had no children, and was married to a man who constantly needed the limelight. On the other hand, her marriage lasted for 57 years, and she shared with her husband a deep love of dogs and horses. This turret was Lady Lonsdale's bathroom. It had the notable distinction of housing a loo hidden beneath a velvet button-backed banquet seat. Mm. Gracie Lonsdale out hunting with the Cottesmore, her husband, alongside. Painted by Cooper Humphreys, the painting was given to National Gallery supporting pictures. Be prepared to bring many layers, Omer. It's pretty cold. Or it's kind of damp. Yeah. But yes, there's a lot of history. It's easy to get around. Friendly people. Airbnbs are very cheap. Amongst many ways, Omer. The Staircase of Lothar. Was remarkable. It was a remarkable endeavor, the construction of Lothar Castle. For the young architect Robert Smirke, it was his first commission. For the builders of the day, it was a tremendous challenge. For the country, it was a new landmark on a grand scale. The tower itself was the pinnacle of the design, open to the full height of the building, with stained glass windows and a series of alcoves that housed a series of statues. During the reign of the Yellow Earl, a huge display of taxidermy joined the statues. Among the trophies were the heads of musk ox, great woolly horned cattle that roam the tundra in the North Canada. These were probably brought back by Hugh Lonsdale following his trip to the Arctic in the 1880s. Staff at Lothar Castle lined up to say their final goodbyes prior to its demolition in 1956. It could be new. That is true, Omer. Well, that one's very good. Yeah, I recommend that too, Omer. I've read most of his books. So here's one of the cabins that was built when the Kaiser visited for some of his staff. And now I think we're going to leave and walk our way back. So on this day, I took a cab out to this location. But at this point, it would have been like what? Yeah, like 3:30 in the afternoon. And the cab company I principally used, the guy, you basically couldn't call a cab in like the early afternoon. It's like 3:30 in the afternoon during school hours because he would do like school runs, take kids back to home to school or something. So there's certain hours you can call the cab. Um, and that was about this time, so I had to walk home instead. Um, this I do not recall what it was. I remember you walk into the estate and it's some wood and stuff, so it might have been in there. Okay, so now we're leaving. I believe this is the River Lothar. I really don't know, Omar. That's a good question. It's been a long time now. Thank you, Nemo. Indeed, Homer. One of the nice things about the English countryside, I don't know if it's different where you are, Omer, but where I am, if you sit down somewhere in the countryside, you'll be absolutely swarmed with insects within a minute or so. You can't sit down without being harassed by insects. Whereas here, there seems to be almost none. There's like amazingly few bugs of any kind, and they're not usually very aggressive. It's almost strange times. You can't hear them, you can't see them. They don't just like crawl over everything like they do around here. So it actually makes it kind of pleasant to sit down in the countryside. Guys, I think some cheddar cheese is being made right now. Now this is King Arthur's Round Table, a henge in the area. Um, a henge is basically a ditch with a central mound of sorts. And then there's a causeway that leads through the ditch to the mound. Nobody knows quite why they or where they, why they were originally made, but sometimes they had obviously stones in them or some other on it, but usually a henge is simply a ditch. And this is actually probably the fourth henge we visited on this trip so far. Because obviously there's Avebury, there's Stonehenge, and there was the other one. I forget what it's called. It's also in this area. Um, so, but you can't see too much here, but you can see those hills are actually a constructed ditch. There's a break in the ditch. You can kind of see the causeway a little bit on the left here, and a central mound of sorts in the center. Oh, maybe five. There's also Windmill Hill. Anyway, um, and you can kind of see some of the surrounding ditch, and then off the side there is the beginning of Penrith, the city edge. So this gives a good view of the entire henge of so-called King Arthur's Round Table. And you have the causeway towards the center on the right, a central mound, and then there's the surrounding um, embankment. It might have been originally enclosed by a palisade or some sort of other wall, but we don't know that now. So, and obviously it's very, very old. I don't know if you guys heard that, but that's the local pack of coyotes waking up for the night. We have coyotes, Homer. Wolves, basically. They're somewhere in the neighborhood. I've never seen them, but I travel through all the woods in this area and I've never seen them, but they are definitely out there. So you should never leave your pet outside at night. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's not a good idea. Um, this is the River Lothar. And then I happened across a field with some bunnies in it, making more bunnies. And there's another field in the edge of town with a horse in it. And that's, I think, the A6 in the background, which is the principal north-south road from London to Scotland. Two Lions Square. I think there's a pub nearby, Two Lions. Bowling Lane. Okay, guys, that's it for today. If anybody has any additional questions or comments, and then I'll close up for the night. Okay, guys, good night to everybody. Good night to Omar, and Nemo, and Kat, and Alex. Um, Especially Gian. I hope Gian's situation improves. Good night, everybody.